The waters of Lake Sorin rippled with an unnatural rhythm as Elder Kim stood at the edge of the ceremonial platform. His webbed hands trembled slightly as he read the message for the third time, the thin paper nearly tearing in his grip. Around him, the grand crystal dome of the council chamber cast rainbow patterns across the stone floor, a beautiful contrast to the grim news he now carried. "They're not coming back," he announced to the gathered Terranai Council, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. "The Galactic Conclave has deemed our situation economically unfeasible." The 7 council members stared at him, their large eyes blinking in the characteristic double flicker of shock. Their blue-green scales, normally iridescent in the light of their red giant sun, seemed dulled by the news. Council Member Park rose from her seat, the ceremonial robes of office flowing around her slender form. "Economically unfeasible," she repeated, her voice rising with rarely displayed emotion. "We've traded with them for generations, we've shared our medical discoveries. Our biological compounds form the basis of their most effective medicines, and now they simply leave us?" "I pressed them for alternatives," Elder Kim said, placing the message on the central stone table where all could see it. "They sent their regrets." "Regrets don't build evacuation ships," muttered older council member Zhou. His scales faded with age. Chief Scientist Han stepped forward, activating the holographic display embedded in the table. A projection of their planet Naria appeared, surrounded by ominous gravitational field markers. "The anomalies will make our planet uninhabitable within 3 months, Han said, her fingers dancing through the projection to highlight the most affected regions. "The ocean temperatures have already risen 2 degrees. Without external assistance, there is no possibility of evacuation." "We could build our own ships," suggested Li, the youngest council member, his optimism still unbroken despite weeks of bad news. Han shook her head sadly. "We lack the necessary materials and technology. Our spacecraft are designed for short orbital jumps, not interstellar travel. By the time we could adapt them, it would be too late." The assembled Terranai looked upward through the crystal dome at the ominous red giant that had once been their life-giving sun. Its unstable flares had already begun disrupting their atmosphere, causing storms like their world had never seen. "We asked 7 different species for help," whispered Li, his voice small in the vast chamber. "Each came, studied us, collected samples of our biology, our art, our music, and then departed." "They're preserving us," said Zhou bitterly, "as specimens, as memory, not as living beings." Outside the council chamber, life continued in the vast underwater city of Nimra. Millions of Terranai swam through the bubble structures and coral architecture, going about their daily lives, unaware that they had been abandoned to extinction. Elder Kim moved to the chamber's viewing platform, watching his people. A group of children practiced traditional bubble singing near the education center, their young voices creating perfect spheres of air that rose through the water carrying their songs. Merchants traded goods in the floating market. Artists worked on the living coral sculptures that had made Terranai culture famous throughout the galaxy. "Should we tell them?" asked Park, joining him at the rail. Kim closed his inner eyelids briefly, a gesture of deep thought among his people. "Not yet. Let them live without fear for a little longer." That evening, as the 3 moons of Naria rose over the troubled waters, Kim swam alone to the ancient archive, a vast library carved into the deepest trench of their world. The head archivist, a female named Sun with extraordinarily detailed scale patterns, met him at the entrance. "You've heard the news?" Kim asked her. Sun nodded once. "The Conclave ships departed with unusual haste. They took copies of our entire genetic library." "Souvenirs," Kim said, the word tasting bitter in his mouth. "What would you have of the archive, Elder?" Sun asked, leading him through corridors lined with water-resistant data crystals and preserved specimens of Naria's evolutionary history. "Need to know if this has happened before," Kim said. "Has the Conclave abandoned other species?" Sun's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Not officially, but there are gaps in the records they provide us. Species that are mentioned and then aren't." They reached the most ancient section of the archive, where records were kept on actual paper, made from deep-sea plants preserved in special solutions. "There was one species," Sun said, retrieving a bound volume. "The Vostok. Their sun was also destabilizing. The Conclave determined that their civilization, while unique, was not advanced enough to justify the resources required for evacuation. What happened to them? Kim asked, already knowing the answer. They're gone, Sun replied simply. The Conclave keeps a small museum of their artifacts on their central world. Kim closed all 3 sets of eyelids, a gesture of deep mourning. We should record everything, he said finally. Every song, every story, every technological achievement. If we are to be nothing but memory, let it be a complete one. As Kim left the archive, he paused at the highest point of the city. The water above was clear enough to see the stars, including the particularly bright one that had appeared recently, the dying star that was disrupting their world's orbit and atmosphere. Then we shall face our end with dignity, he said to the uncaring cosmos, as we have always done. Elder Kim, come quickly. 3 weeks had passed since the last Conclave ship departed. June, the communications specialist, his scales, still vibrant with youth, frantically waved from his monitoring station in the underwater monitoring hub. The circular room, lined with screens and holographic projectors, hummed with unusual activity. What is it? Asked Kim, setting down the cultural preservation plans he'd been reviewing day and night. Dark circles had formed under his eyes, a sign of exhaustion among the Terrani. We're detecting an unknown vessel entering our system, June explained, pointing to the main display where a blinking light moved steadily toward their planet. His webbed fingers flew across the control panel, bringing up technical specifications. It doesn't match any Conclave design in our database. Council member Park emerged from the adjoining room, where she'd been cataloguing their world's biological specimens. Another scavenger come to study us in our final days? She asked bitterly. Perhaps they forgot to collect some particularly interesting sample of our impending extinction. I don't think so, said June, adjusting the sensors. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, not just the Conclave standard channels. What are they saying? Kim leaned closer to the screen, watching the ship's approach with a mixture of suspicion and the first spark of hope he'd felt in weeks. The translation matrix is struggling with their language patterns, but June made another adjustment, and the speakers throughout the room crackled to life. Repeat, this is the UES Horizon. We've received information about your situation. We've come to help. Please respond. Narya, please respond. The voice was unlike any they had heard before, warmer, more emotional than the precise tones of Conclave species. Who are they? Whispered Lee, who had entered silently and now stood transfixed by the message repeating through the speakers. Han, who had been summoned from her laboratory, studied the technical data scrolling across a secondary screen. According to what I can access from our databases, they call themselves humans, a species from a planet called Earth in a system quite distant from here. Humans? Park's inner eyelids blinked rapidly in confusion. I've never heard of them. They applied for Conclave membership about 15 cycles ago, Han continued, reading deeper into the file. They were denied for being too unpredictable and emotionally driven. Apparently they lacked the necessary stability for proper galactic citizenship. Yet they're here, Kim said softly, when all the proper citizens have abandoned us. The room fell silent as they all absorbed this unexpected development. Should we respond? Asked June, his hand hovering over the communication controls. Kim hesitated only briefly. Yes. What do we have to lose? June activated the transmitter. Unknown vessel. This is Narya Central Communication. We receive you. There was a moment of static, then an excited burst of sound that the translator struggled to keep up with. Finally, a clearer message came through. Narya, thank you for responding. This is Captain Reyes of the UES Horizon. We intercepted Conclave. Communications about your situation. We request permission to land and discuss evacuation options with your leadership. Why would you come? Kim asked, unable to keep the suspicion from his voice. The Conclave has deemed us a lost cause. A brief pause, then. With all due respect to the Conclave, we didn't think anyone should be left behind. No one deserves that. We have resources and we're willing to help. Park moved closer to Kim, lowering her voice. It could be a trick. Perhaps they want what the others took, our biological samples, our technology. For what purpose? Asked Kim. In 3 months, there will be nothing left to exploit. Han, still studying the incoming data, looked up suddenly. Their ship is unusual. The technology doesn't match Conclave standards at all. It's less advanced in some ways, but their power configuration is remarkable. And they appear to be alone? Alone? Lee echoed. No escort vessels, no Conclave observers. Just one ship. A new voice came through the speakers. This is Engineer Choi of the Horizon. I understand your caution, but our scans show increasing instability in your planetary crust. If you're willing to accept our help, we should begin discussions. Soon. Kim looked around at his fellow council members. In their eyes he saw the same question. Could they trust these unknown beings when those they had trusted for generations had abandoned them? Outside the communications hub, through the curved transparent walls, they could see ordinary Terranai citizens swimming by, carrying out their daily routines. Parents guiding children to education centers, workers maintaining the oxygen exchange, systems that kept their underwater city habitable, artists creating the living coral sculptures that would now never be shared with the wider galaxy. We should at least hear what they propose, Lee suggested, his youthful optimism breaking through the gloom that had settled over them. Agreed, said Han. From a scientific standpoint, any possibility is worth exploring. Kim took a deep breath of the water flowing through his specialized respiratory chambers. Very well. Captain Reyes, we accept your offer of discussion. We will transmit landing coordinates for your vessel. Thank you, came the reply with what seemed like genuine relief. We'll prepare a landing party appropriate for your environmental conditions. And Naria, we came as fast as we could when we heard. No one should have to face this alone. That night, as word spread through the underwater city about the unusual visitors, Kim found himself standing at the highest point of Nimra, gazing upward through the water at the night sky. For the first time in weeks, citizens were gathered in public spaces talking animatedly, gesturing toward the stars. Do you think they're really going to help us? Park asked, joining him at the observation platform. I don't know, Kim admitted, but they came when no one else would. That alone means something. In the distance, a bright light appeared in the night sky, different from the stars, moving with purpose. The citizens of Nimra pointed upward, their conversations hushing, as they watched the approaching ship. They're here, whispered Kim, and despite all his caution, all his years of diplomatic experience, he felt something dangerous bloom in his chest. Hope. The landing pad, hastily cleared atop one of the few remaining surface structures of Nimra, glistened with spray from the increasingly tumultuous ocean. Elder Kim stood with the council members, their protective membrane suits shimmering in the harsh light of their dying sun. Around them, a crowd of Terranai citizens had gathered despite official discouragement, their natural curiosity overwhelming caution. The human ship, sleek and oddly angular compared to the organic curves of conclave vessels, touched down with surprising gentleness. Steam hissed as its external cooling systems adjusted to Naria's humid atmosphere. It's smaller than I expected, murmured Han, always the scientist, already analyzing what she could see. A hatch slid open on the side of the craft, and after a moment's pause, the first human emerged. The landing party was smaller than expected. Just 6 figures stepped out, each wearing environmental suits that were clearly modified specifically for Naria's atmospheric conditions. Their helmets were transparent, revealing faces unlike any the Terranai had seen before. No scales, strange-colored eyes, and coverings of hair in various lengths and colors. The leader stepped forward, Captain Reyes presumably, removing her helmet in a gesture that drew gasps from the crowd. Exposing oneself to an alien atmosphere was considered either foolish or a profound gesture of trust throughout the galaxy. Our atmospheric analysis shows we can breathe here with minimal discomfort, she explained. Her voice now unfiltered by communication systems. She was shorter than the Terranai, with olive skin and determined eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. We've adapted to your oxygen-nitrogen balance. Elder Kim stepped forward, performing the formal greeting gesture of his people, a flowing motion of webbed hands that symbolized the connection of all life through water. Welcome to Naria, he said simply, "though I fear you have arrived at our ending rather than our beginning." "That," said Reyes with unexpected warmth, "is what we came to prevent." The council chamber, normally a place of measured debate and careful diplomacy, had never hosted a meeting quite like this one. The humans sat awkwardly in chairs designed for the different Terranai physiology, yet they made no complaints. "We intercepted Conclave communications about your situation," Reyes explained, activating a small holographic projector that displayed messages the Terranai had never been meant to see. "Our government sent us immediately." "Without Conclave approval," noted Park, her tone making it unclear whether this was criticism or admiration. A human named Choi, their engineer, laughed unexpectedly. He was stockier than the others, with quick hands that never seemed to stay still. "They rarely approve of anything we do. That's why we act first and apologize later." The casual nature of this statement, so different from the careful political speech of the conclave, caused several council members to exchange glances. "The conclave will not approve of your intervention," warned Elder Kim. "They have protocols, procedures." "While people die waiting for paperwork," interrupted another human, Song, her voice soft but intense. "We've seen it before. Your ship cannot possibly evacuate our entire population," Han noted, reviewing the specifications now displayed by the holographic projector. "We number in the millions." "The horizon is just the first," said Reyes. "We have 3 larger vessels en route, converted colony ships that can support your aquatic needs, and we've brought atmosphere stabilization technology that should buy us more time." She gestured to Choi, who pulled a device from his pack and expanded it into a larger display, showing technical schematics of machines unlike anything the Terranai had seen. "These are gravitational field stabilizers," he explained. Enthusiasm making his words come faster. "They won't fix the problem permanently, but they should give us an additional month of stability, enough time for the remaining evacuation ships to arrive." Park studied the humans suspiciously. "Why would you risk Conclave sanctions for a species you've never met? What do you want from us in return?" The humans exchanged glances, and for a moment Kim feared they would finally reveal some hidden agenda. Instead, the human scientist named Song smiled gently. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said simply. "No sentient beings should be abandoned to die when they could be saved. You expect us to believe you came halfway across the galaxy out of kindness?" Zhou, the elder council member, asked incredulously. "Well, that and stubborn defiance," added Choi with a grin. "The conclave told us we were too emotional and unpredictable to join their ranks. Seems like a good time to prove them." "Right." Later that evening, as human engineers began unloading equipment with the help of Terranai workers, Elder Kim observed something remarkable happening around the landing zone. Despite language barriers only partially bridged by translation devices, the humans and Terranai were communicating through gestures, through shared tasks, through the universal language of solving problems together. A young human technician was attempting to pronounce Terranai words, causing her amphibious teachers to emit the bubbling sounds that constituted their laughter. Elsewhere, Engineer Choi was deep in animated discussion with Han over a set of schematics, both of them drawing in the air with excited gestures. Most surprising of all, Captain Reyes was sitting with a group of Terranai children who had sneaked past the perimeter, showing them a small device that projected images of Earth, oceans and forests and cities, unlike anything on Narya. "So your captain has a way with children," Kim observed to Song, who was overseeing the setup of monitoring equipment nearby. "She has 3 younger siblings," Song replied, adjusting a sensor. "She's always said that saving the future means saving the children who will create it." That night, as human engineers worked alongside Terranai technicians to install the first of the gravitational stabilizers, a strange sound echoed through the underwater sections of Nimra. It took Kim several moments to identify it: singing, human voices, attempting to follow the complex harmonics of traditional Terranai melodies, while Terranai voices tried to match the unfamiliar patterns of human songs. "They've been working for 18 hours straight," Han reported, appearing at Kim's quarters with uncharacteristic animation in her movements. "They refuse to rest until the first stabilizer is operational, And they keep asking questions about our history, our culture, not just to preserve it, but to understand it. Do you believe them now? Kim asked. About their intentions. Han was quiet for a moment, her scientist skepticism battling with the evidence before her. They modified their environmental suits specifically for our atmosphere before they even knew if we would respond to their hail, she said finally. They brought water purification systems designed for our biology. Their captain learns the names of everyone she works with. She looked up at Kim. They work as if we are their own people, Elder. As dawn broke over the troubled waters of Narya, Kim stood on an observation platform, watching human and Terranai workers cheer together as the first gravitational stabilizer came online, its energy field visible as a subtle shimmer in the air. 4. The first time since the Conclave had abandoned them, Elder Kim allowed himself to think beyond the next day, the next week, to consider that perhaps the end was not as inevitable as they had believed. The humans worked differently than any species the Terranai had encountered, with passion rather than precision, with flexible plans rather than rigid protocols, with infectious optimism rather than calculated probabilities. It was chaotic, unpredictable, and exactly what the dying world of Narya needed. A deep tremor shook the council chamber, sending ripples across the water-filled sections of the room. Small objects tumbled from shelves, and the holographic displays flickered briefly before stabilizing. It was the third such tremor that morning. The atmospheric degradation is accelerating, Han reported grimly, manipulating the environmental model hovering above the central table. The projection showed increasingly unstable weather patterns and rising ocean temperatures. We have 3 weeks at most, not the 2 months we calculated. Captain Reyes nodded, dark circles under her eyes after days without proper rest. Her uniform was rumpled, and her hair had been hastily tied back. Like many of the humans, she'd been working in continuous shifts, pausing only for the minimum necessary food and sleep. The first transport ships entered the system last night, she said, updating her own display to show the positions of 3 massive vessels now moving toward Narya. We'll begin evacuation of the children and elders today. The stabilizers are buying us time, but not as much as we'd hoped. Elder Kim studied the evacuation plan, a complex choreography of shuttles, temporary orbital platforms, and carefully calculated life support requirements. Your people have accomplished in days what the Conclave claimed would take months of planning. We work best under pressure, said Engineer Choi with a tired smile. He hadn't slept in nearly 40 hours, sustained only by stimulants and determination. But I won't lie, it's going to be close. Outside the council chamber, the once peaceful city of Nimra had transformed into an organized chaos of activity. Terranai families gathered at designated collection points, each allowed only one small container of personal belongings. Human crew members worked alongside Terranai volunteers, helping elderly citizens navigate the unfamiliar evacuation procedures and entertaining frightened children with stories and simple games. The first evacuation shuttles were being loaded when the alarm signals blared through the city. On the command deck of the UES Horizon, now serving as the Evacuation Coordination Center, screens lit up with warning indicators. 3 ships just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, reported a human officer, her fingers flying across the control panel. Conclave Registry enforcement vessels. A tense silence fell across the bridge. Captain Reyes straightened her uniform as best she could and stepped toward the communications array. Put them through when they hail us. They won't wait long. Seconds later, the main screen flickered to life, revealing the angular features of a Varaxian, one of the founding species of the Conclave. His grey, chitinous face showed no emotion as he spoke. This is Adjudicator Xenoth of the Galactic Conclave. You are conducting unauthorized operations in a system under Conclave jurisdiction. Cease this intervention immediately. The fate of the Terranai has been officially determined. Reyes's face hardened as she stepped forward. This is Captain Elena, Reyes of the United Earthship Horizon. We are conducting a humanitarian evacuation of endangered sentience. We will not comply with your order. Your species risks severe sanctions, human, the adjudicator replied, mandibles clicking in agitation. The Conclave has determined that the resources required for this evacuation exceed the acceptable cost-benefit ratio. Your actions disrupt the established galactic order. Then sanction us, Reyes replied simply, her voice level but firm. But we will not abandon these people. The communication ended abruptly as the adjudicator cut the connection. A moment of heavy silence followed. They'll establish a blockade, said Choi, studying the tactical display. Standard Conclave procedure. They'll position themselves to intercept our evacuation ships. How many people have we evacuated so far? Asked Reyes, turning to the operations. Officer, just under 12,000. Mostly children and their caretakers. That leaves over 2 million, finished Elder Kim, who had been standing quietly at the back of the bridge. The number hung in the air, a seemingly impossible challenge against the ticking clock of their dying world. We continue as planned, said Reyes after only a moment's hesitation. If they want to stop a humanitarian mission, they'll have to do it by force. I don't believe they're willing to go that far. Later that day, as Conclave ships moved into blocking positions above Naria's northern hemisphere, the sensors detected new signals. 7 more vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the edge of the system. Civilian ships, research vessels, even private transports, all broadcasting human identification codes. "Captain," called out the communications officer, her voice tight with excitement. "It's the Artemis research vessel from Europa Station. Captain Yoon says they heard about our situation and came to assist. The others are civilian volunteers." A cheer went up across the bridge, quickly stifled as professional decorum reasserted itself. But the message was clear. They were no longer alone. Over the next 2 weeks, the evacuation continued at a frantic pace. The Conclave ships maintained their blockade, but did not directly interfere, perhaps unwilling to fire on civilian vessels carrying refugees. More human ships arrived, not military vessels, which would have risked full-scale diplomatic consequences, but private ships, scientific expeditions, corporate transports, all volunteering their space and resources. The Terranai were amazed by this uncoordinated yet effective response. "Your government ordered this?" asked Park, as she helped coordinate the loading of cultural artifacts onto a specially designed preservation vessel. Song, working beside her, shook her head. "Our government sent us. The Horizon. The others came on their own when word spread." Without being ordered, Park seemed unable to comprehend this concept. "Some things transcend orders," Song replied simply. As the evacuation progressed, Naria's condition deteriorated rapidly. Massive storms lashed the few remaining surface structures. Underwater, increasing temperatures caused ancient coral structures to bleach and die. Seismic activity fractured the ocean floor, releasing toxic gases into once pristine waters. On the day scheduled for the final evacuation wave, the planet seemed to be tearing itself apart. The last 300,000 Terranai waited anxiously, as shuttle after shuttle braved increasingly dangerous atmospheric conditions to reach them. "The gravitational stabilizers are failing," reported Han from her monitoring station, now relocated to the Horizon. "Massive solar flare incoming. The radiation will penetrate the degrading atmosphere." Captain Reyes studied the tactical display, calculating angles and trajectories. "The last transports won't clear the radiation front in time." For a moment the bridge was silent, except for the steady beep of warning sensors. "We'll shield them," Reyes said finally, her decision made. "Move the Horizon between the transports and the solar radiation. Our shields were designed to handle solar flares." "Captain," Choi objected immediately, "our shields aren't rated for flares from an unstable red giant. The radiation levels are off the charts." "Do we have enough power to protect the transports?" Reyes asked, cutting through his objections. Choi hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Yes, but then we do it. Evacuate non-essential personnel to the transports. Skeleton. Crew only." As the Horizon maneuvered into position between the last fleeing transports and the incoming solar flare, Elder Kim stood on the bridge beside Captain Reyes. They watched in silence as the massive wave of radiation approached, visible on sensors, as a wall of deadly energy. "Your ship may not survive this," Kim said quietly. Reyes smiled faintly. "The horizon has survived worse. Why would you risk your vessel, your crew, for us?" Kim asked, the question that had haunted him since the humans first arrived. Reyes turned to him, her expression serious. "Long ago on Earth, there was a tradition among those who sailed our oceans. No matter what flag they flew, no matter what conflicts existed between their nations, if they encountered a ship in distress, they went to its aid. All quarrels were set aside in the face of the sea's danger." She looked back at the view screen, at the approaching storm of radiation. "Space is just another ocean, Elder Kim, and we won't abandon fellow sailors." The radiation front hit with blinding intensity. The horizon's shields glowed brilliant blue, straining against the onslaught as they extended their protection over the vulnerable transport ships. Warning alarms blared across every deck as systems overloaded and power fluctuated. "Engine 3 is failing," shouted an officer over the noise. "Shield integrity at 40% and dropping." "Divert all non-essential power," ordered Reyes, gripping the command rail as the ship shuddered. "Life support to minimum. We just need to hold until the transports clear the system." The bridge lighting dimmed to emergency levels as power was rerouted to the straining shields. For endless minutes, the horizon stood its ground against the fury of a dying star, its human crew working with grim determination to keep their ship and their promise intact. The transport shuttle's windows frosted slightly at the edges as it descended through the carefully calibrated atmosphere of their destination. Elder Kim pressed his webbed hand against the cool surface, watching as clouds parted to reveal a vast blue-white landscape below. After 3 weeks of space travel, confined to the recycled water environments of the evacuation ships, the sight of open water was enough to make his throat tighten with emotion. "It's called Europa," explained Engineer Choi, who had recovered from his injuries sustained aboard the Horizon during their narrow escape. He sat beside Kim, his tablet displaying technical readouts of the approaching moon. "It's a moon of Jupiter, one of our gas giants. We've been terraforming it for decades. You prepared this for us?" Kim asked, still struggling to comprehend the enormity of what the humans had done. "Not originally," Choi admitted with his characteristic frankness. "It was a long-term scientific project, creating a controlled environment in the subsurface. Oceans. When we learned of your situation, we modified the existing habitats. Our thermal drilling teams worked around the clock to expand the underwater caverns." As the shuttle dropped lower, Kim could see vast, transparent domes protruding from the icy surface, and beneath them, the shimmer of deep water. The shuttle approached one of the larger domes, a magnificent structure that seemed to be built of some crystal-like material that refracted the distant sunlight into rainbow patterns. "It's not exactly like Naria," said Choi, watching Kim's expression carefully. "The gravity is different, about 80% of what you're used to. The water composition required some adjustment too, but your scientists and ours can work together to make it home." The shuttle passed through an energy field that Kim recognized as an advanced atmospheric containment system, then settled gently onto a landing platform. Beyond the windows, he could see other Terrani moving about, already adapting to their new environment. Some wore the special breathing apparatus the humans had designed for the transition period, allowing them to move between water and air environments more easily. "How many of us made it?" Kim asked the question that had haunted him since their desperate flight from their dying world. "Just over 2.3 million, Choi replied softly. "Not everyone, but far more than we initially hoped." Kim closed his inner eyelids briefly, a gesture of both mourning and gratitude that the human had come to recognize. "Without you, it would have been 0. 3 months later, Kim stood on a new ceremonial platform overlooking a vast underground sea. The habitat, now called New Nimra by many, had been expanded with remarkable speed. The engineering challenges of transplanting an entire aquatic civilization had proven formidable, but the combined efforts of human and Terrani scientists had overcome them one by one. Most impressive was the central dome, where Kim now stood. Below him, in the crystal-clear waters, Terrani children swam alongside human children in specially designed breathing apparatus. Their games transcended language barriers, The universal joy of movement in water needed no translation. Above, through crystal panels much like those on Narya, Jupiter loomed majestic in the sky, its swirling storms and bands creating a constantly changing vista unlike anything they had known on their original world. "Still getting used to the view?" asked Park, joining him at the railing. Like many Terrani, she had adapted to their new home with surprising resilience. She now served as liaison between the Galactic Council and the Human Settlement Authority. "It reminds me that great beauty can be found in unexpected places," Kim replied, watching as a particularly large group of children, both species, practiced a new game that seemed to involve complex patterns of bubbles and sound. "The human education specialists say that the children are adapting faster than anyone expected," Park noted, "their language skills especially. Many of the younger ones are already bilingual." "Children have always led the way into new worlds," Kim said. "It has been so throughout our history. Despite Conclave sanctions against Earth for its interference in natural extinction events, a bureaucratic phrase that still made Kim's scales bristle with anger, the alliance between humans and Terrani flourished. Terrani biotechnology, particularly their advances in aquatic medicine and organic architecture, combined with human engineering to create breakthroughs beneficial to dozens of species. Captain Reyes, though facing a conclave tribunal for her actions, had become something of a hero not only to humans and Terrani, but to many younger members of conclave species who had begun questioning the cold calculations of their leadership. "Have you heard from Captain Reyes?" Kim asked, as they watched a new group of human scientists arrive at the research center across the dome. Park nodded. "She transmitted a message yesterday. The tribunal continues, but she seems unworried. Apparently, several conclave member species have begun formal protests over our abandoned status. The cracks in their unity were always there," Kim observed. "They just needed something to make them visible. The horizon itself, though damaged in the solar flare incident, had been repaired and now served as a regular transport between Earth and Europa, bringing supplies, specialists, and increasingly tourists curious to see the unique partnership developing on Jupiter's moon." "We still don't fully understand humans," Park admitted as they watched a team of workers, mixed species, installing a new coral propagation system in one section of the sea. "They risk so much for principles alone." Kim smiled, remembering his conversation with Captain Reyes during the evacuation, just before the horizon had positioned itself to shield the transports. He had asked her then why humans had come when no one else would. "Because everyone deserves to be rescued," she had said simply. "Because we know what it means to feel alone in the universe, and because someday we might be the ones needing help." In the years that followed, as news of the Terrani rescue spread throughout the galaxy, something unexpected began to happen. Other species, marginalized or dismissed by the Conclave's cold metric of worth, began to establish direct relations with Earth. A transport ship of Velian refugees, fleeing a civil war the Conclave had deemed an internal matter, arrived at Earth-seeking asylum, a small colony of Meridic scholars whose research into alternative energy had been suppressed by more powerful Conclave members, requested permission to establish a joint laboratory with human scientists. Slowly, quietly, a new coalition began to form, one based on compassion rather than calculation, on mutual aid rather than administrative efficiency. The humans called it the Accord, a simple name for a profound shift in galactic relations. 5 years to the day after the first humans had arrived on Narya, Elder Kim stood before a gathering of representatives from 12 species. Some former Conclave members, others never admitted to its ranks. The chamber, designed with adaptations for each biology, hummed with translation devices and the murmur of diplomatic conversation. "We gather today to formalize what began with a single act of defiance against indifference," Kim said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "When humanity's ship came to our rescue, they did more than save a single species. They reminded us all that the true measure of civilization is not its wealth or its technology, but its compassion." As the representatives rose to sign the founding document of the Accord, Kim caught the eye of Captain Reyes, now Admiral Reyes, sitting among the human delegation. She smiled slightly and nodded, a simple gesture between friends who had stood together at the end of one world and the beginning of another. In the waters below the chamber, a new generation of children, Terranai, human and now others, played together, unaware that they were the living embodiment of the principle being enshrined above, that no one should be left behind, that everyone deserves to be rescued, and that in the vast darkness of space, the brightest light is not a star but a hand extended in help.